Welcome to the fresh and vibrant airwaves of the Pride and Promotion podcast. Strap in and turn up the volume because you've landed on the podcast that's setting the bar for the most dynamic and inclusive marketing conversations. Join your host, Joseph Federico, as he prepares to dive into the world of marketing with an inclusive twist where we spotlight the LGBT community and celebrate the power of diversity. Get ready to be motivated as we bring in some of the most influential LGBT entrepreneurs and marketing trailblazers who are reshaping the.
Hey everybody, Joe Federico here of the Pride and Promotion podcast. Thanks for joining. Today we have very special guests, Dr. Wolko and Dr. Minuski joining us, and I'd like to have them introduce themselves and we'll get right into some marketing chat.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tony Walko. I am the CEO and primary medical provider of the Healthcare Unity Group. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Well, guys, thank you so much. Again, happy Pride, to everybody involved. So how did you guys, of course, I went to your website, I did my due diligence, went on the website, talked to Brittany, a part of your team. But I want to hear your origin story for those out there at TV Land watching today.
Sure. So we were in private practice. We had met in grad school, and it was a long road from 2017 to about 2020. A lot of obstacles getting a practice started, and then being faced right when we were starting to get some pickup, we get nailed with COVID. So we realized, like many others during the pandemic, that we needed a change in life. We were really happy with what we were doing. We weren't feeling fulfilled. And we had a really strong background in service work. So we used to do a lot of medical trips overseas to, help others. And we realized that, although we weren't going to do that every day, we wanted to incorporate that style of practice into our everyday lives here in the United States, and that's how Healthcare Unity Group was founded.
That's amazing. What are you guys currently doing? Now that COVID is not over necessarily, will always be around, unfortunately. But how are you guys providing for the community just here on out?
So we, after forming Healthcare Unity Group, we decided that we really wanted to go telemedicine heavy. The pandemic changed medicine quite a bit in all areas, not just LGBTQIA plus health, but mental health and all that stuff. So we are predominantly, serving individuals, and I think about how many states at this point? How many? 35. Excellent. 35 states with LGBT competent healthcare.
That's quite impressive, a nice number. How did you guys reach out to individuals before you changed course with your current group, especially on social media?
And so that one.
Okay, so we are going to be speaking with Rich in just a few moments, but we have Tony. And Tony, we were talking about, of course, there's the pride aspect and the promotion aspect. But how did you reach or work on outreach regarding social media before you created this amazing group that you're currently had founded?
So it was honestly Dr. Minuski's social media that kind of propelled our private practice through. There was no marketing. It was just him being him, to be honest with you. Really, his secret sauce is just him, being on social media. But being authentic and, just expressing whatever he thought, in terms of pop culture, especially the drag scene in New York City, as well as the RuPaul girls were really big in propelling a lot of Hug and our private practice. And I would say I think that was primarily what was the driving force.
What's the driving force now? Again, having done my due diligence and seeing how you guys are on camera, how do you feel that social media has driven the business now in a post-COVID world and thereafter?
So I would say we pretty much have three primary sources, well, maybe four. First, I would say would be referrals. As you help members of the community, they tell other members of the community. We kind of have a very unique model in regards to what we offer, how we offer it. It kind of spreads like wildfire. I would also say we have a social media marketing campaign. So we advertise in those 35 states, which has been tremendous. Pay per click ads with again, drag queens, as well as many members of the community. Doc is also a great referral source, as well as Outcare Health, which is a phenomenal website. I recommend others to check that out to find LGBTQIA plus providers in their area. So that's great. I think I had said 4, but I don't know what I'm at now. But yeah, that I would say that's pretty much it, as well as local individuals just finding us on Google.
When did you get on social and realize how important it was to put your likeness to create this persona with thought leadership on platforms?
I would say after seeing his Twitter platform kind of explode during the pandemic, because that's really what happened. He was just home on Twitter being himself, and that really took us to the next level. I realized having the social media presence is so important. So many people not only go to social media for their news. They go there for resources, and some people even go there to socialize. I don't know if you're familiar with the org community, but there's a big LGBT presence in the org community. So those are like organized games, like Big Brother style, Survivor style, for those who are not familiar.
Sure.
And Dr. Mineski is huge with those. He loves playing them. He's very competitive. I'm sure he's running around the house right now just trying to grab his laptop so he can get back on. But yeah, I would say that those types of things really brought to my awareness just how important. And speak of the devil.
Speak of the devil, he appears. Dr. Rich Mineski, thank you for your time today and for joining. And we're happy that you got your laptop. Thank you.
Yes.
We sure can. So I want to turn the tables on you over there because I want your unique perspective. Before, and I heard a lot about you. Of course, we did our due diligence here at the show, behind the scenes in the green room, and even with your team, amazing team. We guys are doing in 35 states. Before things took off, before you created this group during the pandemic, how were you reaching potentials on social media, and what platforms were you utilizing?
Sure. Before Hug came into existence, I would say that a lot of my outreach as far as social media was Twitter. I have a large Twitter following, and naturally and organically, that's just where I like to express my personality versus the other social media formats. And yeah, that was my pandemic outlet, I would say, to kind of find people that resonated with me as a practitioner to give the care that I was giving.
Was there any pushback on social media, either one of you, back then or even now? Because Twitter has turned into X, and other platforms have evolved since then, before the pandemic, and have been born out of the pandemic. So how do you feel that maybe there's been pushback on those platforms regarding what you guys are doing for the community?
I would say, X, not the new Twitter, is very different than it was before the pandemic. From your content being seen and visible to just the interactions in general, it's nothing like it used to be. So our dynamics have changed quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I would also like to, I would also say too, having seen a lot of the comments that are put on our ads, it's actually quite sad how many people are inclined to, put hateful messages and things like that, for ads regarding PrEP and HIV care. Quite a lot, actually. Fortunately, more so than positive engagements.
Yeah.
Which does say a lot, and that's predominantly on Facebook.
And that's really important too. And I hold that up purposely to let everybody know, especially in the community, that, that is part of social media. It's not all rainbows and videos and tweets.
And just to piggyback off of that, we were just discussing this between the two of us, but you can even see, coming from a chiropractic background where it kind of is, there's an element of people have a general ASMR, there's a fascination with it. But when you go into this work and we're posting our posts about what we do and we're helping all of these communities, there's very little engagement. There's, people sharing the content. And I used to take that so personally, and I've let that go. But it's interesting how you can see in social media dynamics from posts that used to be celebrated and shared just organically. And now we're in this new field that needs this care so much, and it's so important, yet people don't feel inclined to interact with it or promote our services for helping people in need.
Do you feel that because there's a stigma around what you guys are doing, and people
Without a
are,
doubt.
without a doubt, agree with
Without a
that
doubt.
too. Yeah,
Yeah, you would. I mean, you would think when it comes to topics that people would, hate on, you would think chiropractic, it's on the fringe. HIV, my gosh, it's been around since the 80s. It killed how many people? Now
yeah,
that we can prevent it and easily treat it, my gosh, like this shouldn't even be a political or religious issue. It
sure.
affects everybody. It doesn't discriminate. But meanwhile, chiropractic is ironically enough celebrated in the ASMR, and it's as an emerging health field. But yet HIV care, because of oftentimes who it affects, is really hated on.
That is such a shame too, especially for the community during Pride Month and just in general. These are life-saving practices in which you guys are assisting with. Again,
Absolutely.
period. So we're gonna do a we're gonna do like a little bit negative because again, I want people to understand that it's not all rainbows and cupcakes and pride flags, but then we'll be a little bit more positive in just a few moments. How do you combat the comments on social? Do you ignore them? Do you face them head on? Do you create more content to combat that and become more positive? I would like to hear from each of you on that.
Do you want me
I
to
can
start?
take that. To be honest, I don't really engage because half the time you don't really know if it's even a real person, right? It could be a bot, it could be
Mhm.
something else. But I do think, in regards to, your point about creating more content, our content, we have everybody who's, we try to have content rather that represents the community. We have
Mhm.
drag queens, we have adult film stars. It's not so much to throw it in people's faces as much as it is, this is for everybody, right? Some
Yeah,
of our ads have older heterosexual couples, right? Because they are also at risk for HIV. It's really trying to show that this work does not discriminate, even though our commenters may,
sure.
HIV does not.
And
You're up.
my perspectives, very similar. The thing that when I see people commenting things that really have no place or purpose, it really puts in perspective where they're at in their own life. When something bothers you so much that you feel inclined to dismiss it or to say something nasty, it's usually when we're looking at human beings, it's something you're rejecting in yourself. Otherwise, it wouldn't really bother you. So for me to feed that energy, it's just somebody that's truly lost and is disconnected from themselves to where they have to attack other people and the work that we do. And it brings us nothing to feed into it because they don't want to hear the positives of what we're doing here.
No,
So just like Dr. Walko saying, we're all about getting our message out there and just continuing to march forward and pushing through it because those words have no impact on the work that we're doing here and the mission that we're on. And we're here to just help whoever wants our help.
sure.
Exactly.
So you're really combating that by educating even further,
Absolutely.
by speaking the truth with all your years of experience combined and, not separately, but you have to educate. People are going to project regardless, and those are the haters, but that's okay. It's never going to stop.
Absolutely.
And that reminds me too, actually, guys, and everybody out there in TV land, I, have a background in PR. And a few years ago, I was working with with my students, my clients in Florida, of all states, which is a whole other conversation. But during Pride Month last year, the the people were coming in saying no to the drag show, so forth and so on. And we had to create a whole different campaign to combat that by educating, by saying this has been around for so long, and doing a historical campaign of why drag is so important, and not even speaking to the haters. So it's all a unique puzzle piece, how to put the puzzle together by being the bigger person, whether you're in the community, whether you're heterosexual, homosexual, everybody in between. It's all about just being human and speaking the truth on social media.
And you bring up a really good point too about, taking something as an opportunity, right? I mean, the historical pieces to, so much ignorance is in hate. It's not the well-informed people. Well-informed people oftentimes do not have hatred because when you understand the logistics of everything, it just doesn't leave any room. But to take opportunities to educate and to remind even those within the community about our historical roots. And we find oftentimes with the younger generations, we're often seeing some higher rates of HIV because they really don't remember the 80s and the 90s pre the protease inhibitor. So, it's unfortunate, but it's important that we connect both the younger generation with the older generation so that they can understand where they're coming from and how to best protect themselves and make the best decisions for their health.
Sure. Like that through social media. Why not?
Through social media.
So more of the positive for a moment. How do you get the word out? How do you approach maybe somebody sending you a private message or direct message or an email or something that may come through over text? One of your patients is a little squeamish about talking about maybe something that they're dealing with. How do you translate that into educating through social media? What's your path on creating those campaigns or reaching out maybe to those people of the younger generations in the community that are afraid of getting tested or there's something maybe even more dire?
I can start with this. So I would say that the biggest thing about HUG, the way that we approach it is Dr. Walco and myself are really hands-on with a lot of our operations. When we're going to engagements and we're representing HUG, it's us personally doing it. And that is intentional because we want people to know the type of care and quality of care that we're here to provide them. And it's all about having that face-to-face interaction. We're not an operation where you're going to be completely closed off and not know who your providers are and you're just going to get your PrEP HIV care. We're very hands-on. We love our patients. We're compassionate and caring. We're members of service. So like that is our passion and light of why we got into this work. Sure. And our social media advertising and all of that is wrapped around that work. So we do advertisements of our previous podcasts, and we just try to find these avenues and ways, referrals from our patients. There's just different ways that we get the word out organically and naturally to kind of give that component of what we're here to do for them compared to other organizations.
Sure.
And I would also say too, it's all about normalizing things. Sex is stigmatized, whether you're heterosexual, homosexual, somewhere in between. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a weird thing, unless you're not stigmatized by sex, but most people are. So normalizing, the conversations, talking about different things that doctors normally don't want to talk about because they're also people, right? So just because they got the white coat on, I mean, and not to sound crude, but talking about eating butt is you got to normalize the behavior. Why? Because there's health risks, and we have to normalize talking about that, talking about testing around it, but also doing it in a way that doesn't further stigmatize it, but encourages patients to express themselves. I love when patients come to me and say, I was afraid to be a top, or I couldn't be a top, or I couldn't be a bottom, but you said something where we did something and it worked. So it's about helping someone express really who they are, I would say, is at the core mission of HUG. Yeah, it happens to be centered around HIV, but to be honest with you, all the work that we do is really about self-expression, especially sexually.
And it should be, because I'm even thinking of myself when I was coming out, not to date myself, but in the 90s, when I started to become more active, in my new body, going through puberty and everything else, exploring, not really sure who I was. Was I bisexual? Was I homosexual? I don't know. But those weren't being talked about in the schools either. So when I started to, went to my primary care doctor back then, because I was still underage-ish as a teenager, having, really shut down when I was getting asked questions about my activity. And I didn't even I would never tell my parents, right? Which I'm sure everybody has that, same or similar experience, but I certainly don't want to tell my doctor. It was almost shameful. to talk about, I really don't like women, for instance. I've been whatever with men. You know what I mean?
Right.
So how do you start those conversations? I know in person, again, I've seen the podcast, I've heard everything, but let's really put on social, regardless of the haters or the bots or what have you. How do you combat or how do you approach those topics of you're gonna have sex, here's what could happen, and let's all be in this together. Period.
I would say from my perspective, it's about talking about what behaviors people are doing and then about risk mitigation. So it's not necessarily about stigmatizing or shaming, but more about, okay, if you're going to do this, let's try doing it with this, and not having unrealistic conversations. People have unprotected sex all the time. We've been having it since the dawn of man. That's how we're all here as a result of unprotected sex. So
Sure.
that being said, if that's the case, let's start with the premise that we're not going to change that, but how do we minimize the risks of that? And that's where DoxyPEP comes in, and PrEP, and condoms, and anything else, or regular routine testing and educating too about, hey, you're doing this behavior, but how do we test for it routinely so that if there is something, we're catching it, we're treating it, and we're not also getting reinfected. So having messages and having conversations with our patients about these topics and being very open, and just trying to put a big smile behind it, even if you're giving someone horrible news, like, hey, you have chlamydia. How I tell someone the news is how they're going to react, like a baby. You smile at a baby, babies smile back. You frown at a baby, babies are going to frown back, and so on and so forth. So if I treat chlamydia or HIV or hepatitis like the end of the world, so will the patients, and it's not. It's just not, and that's how I go about it.
Wow.
And I would just say that the other component that we really bring as healthcare providers at HUG is really self-acceptance. When you accept who you are as a provider, and all of when you come in contact with people, that's what translates when you communicate and educate your patients. It's when you don't accept things in yourself, when you start to judge and place that shame and guilt and all of those things with sexuality. And that we really try to not have any of that in our personal lives, in our practice. So we're congruent with who we are and the providers that we are. And I think that that's something that really translates in the care that we provide.
Which is needed again more than ever, especially not only during Pride Month, all year round. People are going to have sex or share in these activities, regardless of whether at a light party or at themselves at home, right? So, how do we, as members of the LGBT community, especially gay men, work more as a community in destigmatizing the word sex? Or are we as hypersexualized as the world really sees us? Because I would like to get doctors' perspectives on that as well.
I think it's like a mixed bag, right? There are people within the community that, are asexual. There are people that are having, going to orgies multiple times a week. That's why I always, whenever I'm talking to a patient, I kind of go the full spectrum, because I don't really know, what their sexual practices are, rather, outside of what they're telling me. So if I say, talking about DoxyPEP, directions, whether, you've been with one person or you've been with 12 that night, you're only taking it once. So that they kind of know, okay, this doctor is acknowledging group sex. This doctor is acknowledging that these things happen. And that's kind of what I do. And I do that like in my personal life as well. I often have conversations around sex and sexual health, because it's kind of just what I do. I'm kind of one note in that regard.
And the only other component that I would just add to that, especially for our community that is listening and tuning in, there is a lot of healing to be had with your sexuality. Our super ego is our inner critic, and that is developed from our parents, society, and religion. So you have to really look at your belief systems around your sexuality and what you perceive to be true, so that you can express yourself authentically. And that is really how you learn to be who you are and shed all of those things that were taught to be true. And that is just so important and something that we try to bring into Hug, because we have learned this over our years of practice, and it really transforms people, because sometimes we think we know who we are, and then you could be, in your 30s and 40s and really figure out who you are, and it's like a new life, and it's so exciting to be liberated in that sense.
And that's one of the most beautiful experiences a human can go through, at least in my opinion, is to eventually become who you're really meant to be.
Absolutely.
Not only on social media, but in your community, as whoever you are, period, right? So speaking of, I'm glad you said that, because my next question really is going to revolve around creating personas, your most authentic selves. We see you guys, of course, here, for those tuning in, of course, your most authentic selves as doctors, but how did you create, or how did you think your persona was going to be when you started on social media versus how it is now? Good one, right?
I will let you take that one.
Take the ball and run.
My persona on social media. I believe that I first used social media as an outlet to be almost like a comedian in some senses, kind of like an attention getter. Like, I wanted to be at the center of attention in some ways. That's how I first started my social media account. I was, trying to do memes and jokes that just made me laugh, so that I can find a community that gravitated towards me.
Sure.
And where my social media is going now, as I'm evolving as a human being, is it's really starting to become more congruent with who I am. And now I'm unapologetically myself. So, I do a lot of trauma work on myself, as you could tell, like what I bring in presence here. I want to educate people on what I've learned and the wisdom that I've gathered that has helped me shed the past that I had to let go, so that people can learn from myself to come into their own, because that authenticity is so, like you said before, it's like one of the sweetest things of life, to truly just tap into who you are. And I transformed after coming into social media. So that's kind of how my arc has occurred.
Amazing.
I won't lie, I'm not really that big on social media, but to be honest, but that's authentically me.
I've people too. Yeah.
Right. I enjoy, the face-to-face. I guess I'm old school at the age of 33, but I do think, I don't have as many filters. I don't really care. I am a little bit more cognizant of what I share, because as you start working with more people, right, you realize that there's a lot of perspectives.
Yeah.
So what I find funny or not offensive or this or that, other people's may. So I try to just share things that, I really just find fascinating. Definitely, I would agree with the self-work. I like to share a lot of those topics because I feel like those are somewhat universal. And if they resonate, they resonate. And if they don't, it's not really as offensive to anybody. But, stuff like that, I would say is kind of my bread and butter on social media.
Both honest answers, and I appreciate that. And everybody out there in TV land will too. One final question before we wrap up, guys. How are you celebrating Pride this month?
We've already gone to a couple of Pride events, Montclair Pride in New Jersey, as well as
I was there
Asbury
too.
Park.
Wow,
You
small world.
were?
Yeah, 30,000 people.
Oh,
Walked in
wow.
over 30,000 people. Yeah.
Yeah, just being present. Excited for New York City Pride. That's always one that I've gone to for 15 years, which is crazy to say because it's been that long. Just getting into the spirit of getting out and being with people of the community, right? Because although, we're the LGBTQI plus community, I mean, it keeps growing, right? And it's not homogenous. It's so many different people, but there is something so magical about being with people that you can connect with on a certain level, whether, it's your expression or your past or even your trauma. Oh, you want to talk about trauma? Talk to Dr. Rich. He loves talking about trauma. So that's kind of how I'm celebrating Pride this year.
And Dr. Rich, how about you? Happy Pride. What's going on here?
I mean, we're a couple duos, kind of attached to all the things that he just mentioned. And I'd just say, Pride season for us is a little bit different. It's really a balance because our organization is so busy during this time of year, and it's really hard sometimes to separate work from personal. And what we've been just working on is really incorporating to make sure that we take care of ourselves and have our own fun in the meantime to celebrate this month along the way while we're busy at work.
Amazing. Well, guys, if there's anything that the Pride and Promotion podcast team can do to help spread the word beyond the podcast, please let us know. I'll be more than happy to be, but just team Pride.
I appreciate that.
We certainly want you guys on, of course, in the future and to continue this conversation. We are at the end of the podcast. If you guys can let us know how we can find you on social, and then we'll wrap this episode right up.
Sure. So my personal socials are Rich Minuski on Instagram and R Minuski on Twitter. Hug socials are Hug Cares or Hug FL, depending on the format. I'm not sure which is which, so
I will look that. So yes, for Instagram it is Hug Cares, and personal. The sad thing is I don't even know my handle. It's AJW830, which happens to be my initials, and my birthday, Team Virgo.
And we'll certainly find you. Don't worry.
You find us. Yes, that's how much I'm on social. But
guys, thank you again so much for coming on the show. We truly appreciate it. Happy Pride to everyone. Your team and to everyone that you assist. And everybody, another episode of the Pride and Promotion podcast. Go forward with Pride, and we'll talk soon. Peace.
Thank you.
And just like that, we're putting the finishing touches on another fabulous episode of the Pride and Promotion podcast. If today's conversation struck a chord, why not sing our praises with a quick rating and review on your podcast platform of choice? Your support is the spotlight that helps us shine and bring more folks into our ever-expanding audience. And don't forget to hit subscribe. Let's get social too. Follow us online for all the extra goodies, sneak peeks, and continued dialogue about marketing with pride and purpose. Tune in next time as we unfurl more colorful stories, champion the cause of inclusivity, and learn more from the creme de la creme of the industry. Until our paths cross again, keep pushing boundaries, stay true to yourself, and infuse every project with pride.